All right, I think we are ready to start the meeting. Thank you for coming out. For those of you who are with us in person, and just like worship, thank you for those of you at home that have chosen to be a part of the live stream. The challenge of today doing a live stream meeting is that the folks at home have a limited ability. They can't like raise their hand and they can't like speak out. I mean, you can yell at the TV all you want to. But we do want to give them an opportunity to share. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. If you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and make a comment. Pastor Allison is monitoring those. If there's any questions, she'll lift those up. I also will invite you to call my cell phone. If that is something you want to do. I've already been warned that somebody might call and ask what we're having for dinner on Wednesday night, just for the fun of it. And also, we're going to soon, because most of the things that we're doing are approving reports. I don't think there's anything overly controversial that's going to come up in a motion tonight. If that were to happen, we'd have to reschedule something and have it either all live or something like that. If you're at home and don't want to vote in favor, send us a note if you want that to be part of the record. We will do that because, even when we vote here with everybody here, it's not an anonymous vote. So you can put it on Facebook, you can call in and let us know. You can even let us know afterwards, and we can make it a part of the record. Any questions? Well, does everybody have a booklet for the annual meeting? And for those who are joining us on the live stream, there was a link to that in the worship email that went out this morning, so you can get that. Also, if you're at home and want to get a copy of it, feel free to contact the office, and we'll be happy to pop one in the mail to you, so you have it in hand if you'd like. So I'm going to officially call this meeting to order. We have been authorized by the district superintendent and the bishop appropriately to have an all-church conference tonight with the agenda as printed in our program. So we're going to start, as we should always start our meetings and our day, with a bit of devotion. And I've asked our chair of our church council to come up and share some thoughts with us.
I'm not as eloquent as my daughter Lindsay, so I'm just putting that out there. Good evening, I'm Sherry Mello, and I'm pleased to be sharing devotions with you for the annual meeting tonight. I chose a verse from Matthew chapter 13, verse 31 to 32. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree so that the birds come and perch in its branches. Isn't it easy to overlook small opportunities to show an act of kindness or help others because we don't think it will make a real difference? These might seem meaningless, but when we get to heaven, I think we'll be surprised by what mattered most, what actually changed the world, what fulfilled the purposes for which we were created. The small places we showed up and served in obedience will prompt Jesus to say, "Well done." Remember when you took the time to share encouraging words with someone who needed them? That's the day you helped change the world. God has a pattern of taking what makes us feel less than and using it for great things. Hundreds or thousands of people following us on social media isn't the big influence we think it is. Being kind and gracious to that person who works at the grocery store or a visitor in church does more than we know. God has the most beautiful, powerful ability to take the little we have offered to him in obedience and magnify it for his glory. On December 21st, when I was in the parking lot of Trader Joe's, before I went inside, God nudged me, well, actually pushed me, because these these things don't come to me as often as maybe they come to some of you, so I knew that it was recognizable. He wanted me to hear him say these words out loud. God, show me how I can be a blessing to others. Use me to be your hands and feet. I repeated those words until I felt it, and then I went inside. 30 minutes later, after I left the store, there I was, not being able to stop my car due to the snow and poor road conditions, hitting another car, but that didn't cause the injury. When I stepped out, I fell on the ice, and I laid there with a fractured shoulder. That kind of blessing was not really what I had in mind. As Christmas approached, I tried going about everything I normally did, except I couldn't. I couldn't drive, still can't. Couldn't lift cooking pans, couldn't fold clothes, still can't. Couldn't wrap presents, couldn't wash my hair, couldn't dress myself, and couldn't help in the nursery at church, which I like to do. I felt broken, not being able to give all of myself to everything I used to do, and the fact that it was Christmas was discouraging. I lost the desire to push through, which soon became, why bother? A week and a half later, I was due to have surgery. Never having needed surgery before, I was scared to death. I one-handedly typed an email to Pastor Robert, which took me over an hour. Pastor Robert emailed me words of faith and reassurance and encouragement to focus not on myself, but everyone on my medical team who would be caring for me and be a blessing to them. A mustard seed. When I arrived for surgery, I walked in the entrance to the surgery center, and there unexpectedly stood Gina Patch from our church. She offered a hug and words of encouragement, a mustard seed. I began receiving calls, messages, and cards with notes from many of you to wish me well, a mustard seed. My husband and girls drove me places and ran my errands, a mustard seed. My mom still drives my daughter Lindsay and me to my daughter's voice lessons every Monday, and it allows us to have dinner together and enjoy that time, a mustard seed. It was during this time when God gave me the same nudge as December 21st, but this time it was different. I will help you be a blessing to others, but it won't be as you imagined it will be, and it will be on my timing, not yours. And first you need to be a blessing to yourself and give yourself grace. Don't focus on what you can't do, focus on what you can do. I can figure out how to cook meals for my family that only require one arm. I can fold towels for my family. They are very messy. I can shovel the sidewalk with one arm so others have a clear place to walk. Your neck can actually be used as an arm too. I can hold the door for others with my right hand. I can seek justice, love, and kindness. I can hug women from the Minnesota and Dalton Teen Challenge as I did last week and let them know that I'll pray for them. I can reassess my commitments and priorities and decide to invest more deeply in my family, friendships, and my church. God has the most beautiful, powerful ability to take the little we have offered to Him in obedience and magnify it for His glory in a big way. No matter what we may be facing, we have an opportunity not to overlook the small mustard seed opportunities where we can invest in others today. I found as we purposefully ease the ache in others, we will see it is beautifully eased in us. The unseen ache, the unheard ache, the unnoticed ache. We want to live in a better world, right? So let's make the decision today to contribute to making it better. Let's vow to bring heaven to earth with the loving words we say and sharing the talents and gifts we can. It doesn't have to be big to be significant. We can show up, we can listen and lean in, we can pray. We don't have to push or prove to earn anything. We can plan to do something that will simply be kind and honor God. The next big step God wants us to take may appear small by the world standards. Loving our next door neighbor who lives alone, spending extra time with our child, parent, or friend when we're exhausted, going the extra mile for someone who can't repay us, giving our all in something we want to quit. God is inviting us to be part of great things He is doing all around us, but we may miss the invitation because of its appearance of smallness or insignificance. We may never know what that next step is if we don't listen for God's voice in everything we do, everywhere we go, as Proverbs 3 verse 6 instructs us. Each day we can look for his invitation to leave our plans behind, to join him in his wondrous works through small steps of obedience. Let's start with the people and opportunities right in front of us and watch how God turns something small into something big and beautiful in his timing. Please pray with me. God, thank you for your ways you love us. We see your faithfulness in big and small ways every single day. We pray you would show us small ways we can invest into eternity by helping others you put in our path. Show us someone to encourage, someone to serve, someone who needs to be reminded that you are for them. Show us how we can use our talents and gifts to be a blessing to others, our church, and our community. We know we can't help everyone, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't help someone. In Jesus' name, amen.
Wow. Do you feel the same way? That was amazing, Sherry. Thank you. And she called and asked, is there anything I can do? I was like, well, how about a devotion? I didn't expect that. Thank you for sharing of yourself and your journey and the things that are going on within you. That is truly an inspiration. Our next step in our agenda is to approve the minutes from the 2022 annual meeting, as it's all nice and fresh in everybody's memories. I put this before you for consideration. Is there any? Yes. Thank you very much. It's been moved to accept the minutes. Do I have a second? Second has been given. Thank you, Barb. All those, any discussion about the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye. Those opposed? And they have passed. Let us now take some time to celebrate the ministries. Within our reports, we have a number of reports that are in here that talk about everything from the work that the pastors have been doing, the works that the committees have doing, and I like to leave this time open for anybody that would like to share about the ministries that are going on in the life of the church. They can be things that you're in charge of or things you just want to lift up. I do know I have a ringer in that Scarlett Riley has asked to speak a little bit about the missions piece, so I'm going to walk the microphone, now I've got my big mic on, back to her so that she can share with us the work of the missions group.
Thank you. Good evening. First, I just want to thank everybody for all the support that they do give the missions team. We would not be able to do what we do without the help of the whole church. I did want to give everybody kind of a heads up on what we're looking to do this year. One of the things is we want to continue to develop our relationship with within the local community. We really want to be the light for our community. The other thing we'd like to do is expand our reach. We've got a lot of great mission opportunities, but we are going to need your help. The missions committee is stretched a little bit thin at the moment. So we're looking for the church to help us facilitate certain mission events, or even just execute a small part of a mission event. So no big time commitment. You don't have to attend meetings. So if you feel like you could help the missions team out a little bit, even if you only have an hour to give, we can find a spot for you. So don't be shy. Feel free to email me with any time available or anything that you'd like to help with. We also wanted to let you know that we would love to have your feedback. Any ideas that you have that you would like to see us support, or any feedback on some of the things that we have supported in the past as well. Any questions?
Thank you, Scarlett. And I'm pretty sure that if there's something that you're feeling called to, even if you don't know where it fits in, Scarlett's really good at kind of matching together people's interests and the ways that they are able to, the things they can do, as was lifted up before, and not worried about all the things you can't do. Talk to Scarlett, and I'm sure the missions team will find a way to weave that in. And as she said, you don't need to join the missions team in order to be a part of the missions of the church. In fact, we want everybody to participate in those ministries. Are there any other words that want to be lifted up about the ministries and missions of the church? Then I'm going to move on to the finance and stewardship updates. I was asked by the finance team to prepare a presentation to talk a little bit about where we stand financially as a church. Each year it seems like there's something that needs a little bit more attention in these annual meetings. Last year we kind of went through where we stand with our staffing and how that was looking and how we were moving forward with some of the challenges that we had there and how we kind of designed what that was going to look like moving forward. This year, it's about finances. So we're going to focus on finances for a minute. So the question I would have for you is, how many, by show of hands, have the impression that we're in a pretty good place as a church financially? Go ahead and raise your hand. How many of you think we're not in a good place? Raise your hand. How many of you have no idea where we're at? Raise your hands. Okay, perfect. We're going to focus on this, and like any good story, there's good news and there's bad news. So I'm going to start out with the good news. And even the bad news isn't so bad. It's just opportunities for us to be aware of and the challenges that we might face moving forward. I want to go back to 2022, and the next slide has a big number on that. Anybody have any idea what $1,398,917 stands for? Guesses? What? Value of the property. That's a good guess. Other guesses? Believe it or not, that is the revenue that we received into this church in 2022. It is also magically the amount of our expenses for 2022. And the reason those two things match is because when we ended the year, our last council meeting, we made a motion and said, you know what, any money, if we end up in the black, any money that would be in the positive, let us dedicate it into a dedicated account and hold it aside for our HVAC replacement system that's going to happen this next year. The good news is that once we did all of our numbers and we finished it up at, about 11 a.m. on Friday, finally we figured all that out, and we were about $17,000 in the black. That's a great news. So that money shifted into a dedicated account, so we literally have a balance between income and expense. Now, for some of you, you might be looking at me going, that's not the way it works in my business. We're a nonprofit. We do much more fund accounting than other businesses might do. For example, when we buy this new HVAC system, if we were a regular business, we would buy it and then we would report it as a capital improvement, and then we would, over the next 10 to 20 years, depending on what the lifespan of that HVAC system would be, we would depreciate it. And that depreciation would hit each year as an expense. It doesn't do us any good to do that in the church. We don't have any tax benefit. There is no reason to make that happen. So we operate much more on kind of a cash flow basis. One of my good friends once told me, cash is king. It's kind of like if you have a bushel basket of apples, you can only take out the apples that are actually in the basket. You can't just wish there were more and use them for something if you don't have them to begin with. This is very true in church finances. So $1.4 million. Anybody surprised by that? That's a big number. Nobody's surprised? You know, folks, this is no different than Sunday morning. I will keep repeating myself over and over and over again until I make sure that's a big number. And maybe for some of you it's not. Well, to help us break that down, there really is 2 units within our church that help us understand. One is the Early Childhood Center and one are the church operations. So I've broken down in this next slide what that looks like. So the amount of money that has come in with the Early Childhood Center is $666,000. What's come in through the church is $733,000. That in total comes up with our $1.4 million. Now I did put a little footnote in there in that when we set the budget for 2022, the budgeted income for both groups was higher than what actually happened. $133,000 higher than what actually occurred. Now, if you remember what I said before, we ended up with $17,000 in the black. That means we had more money coming in than we had going out. So we not only, we may have come short from what we budgeted in the income, but we also came short even more in the money that we spent. Make sense? By $17,000. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to break this down even further to help you kind of get a grasp about where this money comes from. For the Early Childhood Center, and again, I'm just keeping it super simple. We have many more categories, but if I talk too much about numbers, I'll start losing you really quick. The 2 categories are what families pay for the services that they receive at the Child Care Center, and we receive money from grants and other sources. Now, I will tell you that grant money line 2 years ago really would have been very small. We do receive some grant money that actually doesn't even show up as income in our reports if you were to look at our reports when it comes to things like the food program. The food program helps support what we feed our children. We apply for it. They give us grants. But we have decided quite a while ago that we didn't want to count that as income. We just wanted to count it against the expense of the food. So it actually shows up for the finance people in the group, a contra expense. It's a negative expense. So it reduces what is actually spent, and that's what we budget based on knowing that we will be getting some money back from the government for our food program. This $78,000 has nothing to do with the food program. This $78,000 is over the last 3 years with the pandemic. Our state government primarily has said that there needs to be some focus on childcare. They offer us these grants because we are an ongoing operation that continues to serve the children of our community, the children of our state. I can proudly say that in the last 3 years, not a single one of our employees ever missed a paycheck because of the pandemic. My excuse for that was, they're not making enough to miss a paycheck. We need to continue to pay them, and you know what? That paid off because we have not lost a single employee as a result of the pandemic. Did some people move on and do other things? Absolutely. But they stayed as long as they could as part of our organization. We have great staff. We continue to have great staff. Even though it sounds like we're always talking about needing more, we always need more. We have run into a couple of instances in the last couple of years where, because we didn't have the staff, we couldn't take on additional children in our child care center. There was a demand for it, but we didn't have the employees to do it. But in the end, that $78,000 was of huge benefit to us. I can tell you that if we didn't have that money, the Early Childhood Center would have still ended up in the black. They ended up in the black this year by about $56,000. We received 78. We would have been in pretty good shape, even if we had not received those, because we probably would have changed up our operations a bit as we went forward. I can also tell you the reason that they were $56,000 in the black is because as a church, we were $56,000 in the red. So some of you might be sitting there going, oh, wait a second, are we profiting on our Early Childhood Center? We charge back to the Early Childhood Center a very small, relatively small amount of money to pay for the building that is used by the ministry. And that includes cleaning, that includes utilities, that includes the support we offer as administrative support in our office, leadership support, all of those things. We don't come close to providing that level of support, or we don't come close to charging the level that's provided, because we also recognize it as a ministry. There are some years, in the 11 years I've been here, some years the ECC has been up, other years the ECC has been down, and the church has been up, and we've covered the expenses. It goes back and forth. We're comfortable as a finance team to say that this is the amount that we normally expect to have them come back with. Again, it's a small percentage. We also don't feel guilty in those years where we need that to help cover the expense. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's go to the next slide. And this gets into where the church revenue comes from. There are really kind of two buckets. There's the pledges and contributions, which makes up a vast majority of that number. $722,000 was literally money that came into the church from the gifts and contributions from our congregation. That's awesome. And that's above what is pledged. We have a number of people that pledge but give more than what they've pledged. And we have people that don't pledge at all and still give regularly and faithfully to the church. $722,000 is that number. This year, the special giving is particularly low, only $11,000. Why is it low? Is it because people didn't give at Christmas time or Easter? That's not the case at all. The reason that it's low is we found ourselves in a situation where we had financial reserves in the market that lost money. Now again, we're not playing stockbroker here at the church. We're not just taking the gifts that you have and investing them, but because of some things, and I'll get into that in just a minute, because of some choices we made and decisions, we ended up having more of a reserve than we ever would have expected. And we felt it was responsible as a finance team to try to be good stewards of that. We put them into what we believed were some safe tools. Those safe tools lost money this year. I don't see anybody that's shocked that money lost money this year. So that brought that down probably by about $25,000. that would have been really helpful, would have made a big difference. And now we find ourselves as a finance team meeting in the next couple months going, do we take it out or do we leave it where it's at? What's the right thing to do? But I did want to break that down so you had a chance to see what that looks like. And like on the other slide, this represents about $61,000 less than what we had originally budgeted for the church income. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, there's another big number, $543,000. $543,000. Anybody have any idea what that number stands for? The cost to keep us open? For about half a year. $543,000 is actually the amount of cash reserves we have on hand. That's a big number. Let me break it down for you a little bit. Let's go to the next slide. This $543,000 really is broken up into two different categories. And again, I can break it into a lot more, but just trying to keep it simple. Of that $543,000, $280,000 are designated accounts. That's when we've either received something for a particular purpose, the youth mission trip. That comes in, it goes into account. They're called 9,000 accounts in our bookkeeping language. That is set aside. We don't spend it for anything else. That $280,000 includes all of our designated accounts. That leaves the remainder of $263,000 as undesignated reserves. That's money we have in the bank that isn't dedicated to some other specific particular purpose. Now, I'm going to burst your bubble a little bit because that $263,000 also includes about $111,000 of prepaid pledges. So people that come in at the end of the year and write out a check for their giving for the whole next year, that goes into that undesignated. That'll get parsed out each month and be received as income in our financial statements. So of that 263, 111 of it really is already marked for the ministries in this upcoming year. Does that make sense? And I'm kind of looking at Dennis. If I stray from the path, you'll let me know, right? Dennis is on our finance meeting. So far, so good. So let me break this down a little bit also, because one of the good news is that of that $280,000, some of that money is already designated for our HVAC system. We had to make a decision. Let's go to the next slide. We had to make a decision as both the finance committee made a recommendation and the church council adopted it. When you have $543,000 in cash reserves, I found it very difficult to go back to the congregation and say, we need you to make a capital gift so that we can get our new HVAC system because it's falling apart. We could have, and I'm sure the congregation would have responded and given. But I also felt that there is a level, well, as one member told me when I first came to the church, I don't give money so the church can save it. I give money so the church can use it. Now, let me also say that a big portion of that fund also came during the pandemic when we applied for a PPP loan and it was forgiven to support the employment of people that are part of our church. At first, when that opportunity came available, we as the finance committee said, you know what, we don't need it. We don't need to go to the government for that funding. About 6 months, 8 months, 9 months later, we found ourselves in a place where we were talking about the possibility of hiring a director of music ministries. We had been without one because the chancel choir wasn't practicing, we kind of had gotten comfortable in that level of expense as a church. When I proposed that we hire somebody, in particular Matt and Molly, that was going to be an investment. And there was some reservation about whether we could afford to have a director of music ministries. Now, on the one hand, we could say, do we have the money to do it? Will their presence increase the giving within the congregation? Well, the best bet to kind of bridge those two viewpoints was, this is what the PPP loans are for. We're supposed to be hiring people. The government is using us as a way to get money in people's pockets to make a difference. Now, what happened is we received that about $110,000. It was forgiven because we've kept everybody employed. In fact, we added employment. And then lo and behold, giving sort of picked up and was able to support the music ministry pieces. That's why we still have the $110,000. That's why we have $543,000 in reserves in our account. This is all really good news. So we have 3 accounts. Oh, no, go back to the last one. I didn't explain it. There's 3 accounts within our designated accounts that we, as the finance committee and as the church council, have approved, that they wanted me to bring to this group to make sure you understood that we're taking these designated funds and we're going to use it for HVAC. Those 3 accounts include some money that's still part of our capital campaign general account. We still have people giving to our capital campaign. They feel good about that. They continue to give towards it, and it has added up to the point we have about $21,000 in that account. We felt in finance and as the church council, this sounds like a capital need. We're going to use the money that's already been given. That's the $20,910. The second piece is that $31,760. And let me give you a little history lesson. When I came here 11 years ago, we had just finished what was intended to be the first phase of a 3-phase building project. There was talk about adding on an addition as a second phase and adding on a whole building as a third phase. That seemed not likely to happen. We had also, as a church, made a decision to hold on to the money that had been given towards the capital campaign, and we still took out a mortgage for the improvements. The improvements were needed. We needed to get rid of the staircase. It was right in the middle of the narthex. We needed to get rid of, or we needed to add the stairwell in. We also needed to add all the sprinkler systems within the entire church. That was an improvement that was worth making. We needed to make it. It was worth spending the money. But at the time, people were a little bit nervous about using this money that had been given for that purpose because there were 2 more phases. It became clear that we probably weren't going to have enough funds to move forward with the second and third phase. And so the decision was to kind of put that on permanent hold. In the same breath, we went back to the congregation and said, you've given this money for the capital campaign. We're not going to do the other 2 phases at this time. We're going to give you a choice about how you want your money spent. You can put it towards paying down the debt that we've already taken on. You can use it towards current capital projects. And we did a lot of upgrades within the building with those funds. And the third opportunity was for future projects. Future projects meaning if we do the second or third phase, there was some people that felt that we needed to have that nest egg because we didn't have a nest egg when we went into it initially. That future projects money has sat in that account and continued to sit in that account. And now it's the recommendation of the finance team as well as the church council to use that money for that purpose. So that's the $31,760. Future projects, $52,000, was an account that opened. Again, I love this story because about 2 months, 3 months before the pandemic hit, we had somebody that used to be a member of this church come into my office with another member of the church and presented me with a check to the church for $50,000. And they said, we don't know why we're giving this to you, and we're not going to put any strings on this. You use it in ways that the church needs it, and we trust River Hills to do the right thing. Wow. 2 months later, I had to go to the council and say, I need to spend about $15,000 so we can do live streaming in a quality manner. Somebody gave us $50,000 for some reason that they didn't know 2 months ago. Can you trust me that if we need to use that money, this is a good way to use it? And without hesitating, the council said yes. And we moved forward. Thank goodness we did, because within 2 weeks, all the equipment that we bought that next day was unavailable because it had sold out, because everybody else was trying to do the same thing. We were able to act quickly. Thank you, Jesus. Now, interestingly enough, we have used some of those funds over the years for other different projects, but we just added $17,000 back into it. That's why it's more than what it originally started out to be. That's why it's at $52,000. It got down to about $35,000. We added the 17 back in. So the total of those three things means we have a nest egg of $104,000 to go towards that new HVAC system. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, we're thinking 130 something. Right, all the asterisks. But that's in the ballpark, right? Right. So we literally only need to take about $30,000 more out of our undesignated reserves to be able to pay off that bill, check mark. We also, though, as things happen in the life of the church, have a sanitizer in our kitchen that went kaputs, and we need to make some choices. Do we replace the sanitizer? Do we move towards a dishwashing system in that space? And that's where we're at. So that money is still, it needs to be figured out. Could it come from undesignated? Yes. Might we have a campaign for kitchen upgrades? Possibly. But I just want to lay that out there so everybody knew that that stuff happens in the church. Okay, next slide. So when we break down the cash reserve, we have about $140,690 for that's set aside in that cash reserves for the HVAC. That leaves other designated giving at about $175,000 for 11, and undesignated reserves of $263,441. And remember, there's about $111,000 in prepaid giving that's part of that 263. Just thought let's go to the next slide. So we're talking about next year. So when we look at the budget that was approved by the council and recommended by the finance committee, we have a budget of about $1.5, almost $1.6 million in expenses that we need to offset with income. And it breaks down just like it shows there, $723,000 for the ECC, $827,000 for the church. We have never gotten above that $800,000 level before, but as we put our budgets together, that's what came out. I also want to say that if you compare it to the budgets from 2022, it's about a 5% increase. We're hoping that's realistic. given we know that there's going to be increases in costs as a result of lots of different things, and we did, no, I'm sorry, it's 4% increase because we gave a 3% increase to our employees, and the overall budget went up 4%. So that includes some of those additional expenses that we anticipate. But everybody felt that just looking at that solely seemed very reasonable. Also with the ECC, $723,000. Let's go to the next slide. Because we don't know about grants and those kind of things, they kind of go on a regular basis. We're fairly comfortable that given that there wasn't a big change governmentally, that we'll probably be continuing to see some support for childcare. But right now, there's no money budgeted for that purpose. This was $57,000 more than the actual income in 2022. It's very realistic if we have the staff to be able to support the population of kids in the child care center. We have the space, but we need more staff to help make that happen. Let's go to the next slide. The church revenue breaks down like this, and this is where we start getting a little nervous because we have pledges in hand. Well, not quite in hand. We have a projected amount of pledges of $616,000, and that's based on what we do have in hand and what we conservatively believe we will receive from people who either don't pledge but give regularly, or from people that haven't pledged, have always pledged. We don't have any reason to think that they're not going to continue giving. We use the number that they had given up through November as their contribution for 2023. I know that's a little bit, there's a lot of moving parts there, but basically it's a conservative, we feel it's a conservative number to say that we're going to call this pledge at $616,000. The special giving and other of $17,000 is again those things like the Christmas offering and the Easter offering. It includes the income from Rum Cafe, even though we have an outgoing expense that keeps that balanced. And so that's about $17,000, which leaves $193,704 of income that we have no idea where it's going to come from. We know we need it in order to do the ministry that we've grown accustomed to doing the way we've grown accustomed to doing it. That's a big number. At one point in time, when I first came to this church, they called that the faith line. I kind of reeled back and was like, I don't think this is about faith, people. This is a recognition that we have money that hasn't been pledged that we're going to need to receive in order to balance our budget. Now, the good news is even though it's $193,000, if you compare apples to apples with 2022, what actually came in, we're only talking about $93,000, $94,000 more than what actually came in. Now, that's still a big number. I'm not trying to downplay it, but it's not quite $193,000. So we had about $100,000 more actually come in to the church. And to me, that's that unpledged thing. So if we had $100,000 unpledged giving that came in 2022, is there a reason to believe that that's not going to come in 2023? And before I get all too excited about that, I feel like I need to kind of tap the brakes a little bit and share with you what our actual pledges have come in at so far, and that's the next big number, $542,501. That's the actual pledges. So if you compare that to the, 616? That's, 616. These, we actually have pieces of paper that people said, we're going to give this money. Again, most of you are in that category. That's why you're here. You get it. The church needs to know what you're going to give so we can make some choices. On my heart, I felt that it was important to kind of put this number into context. And this is the piece that I wanted to add to your understanding today. And let's go to the next slide. I took the pledges that we'd been given and divided up into 3 categories. The first category is people that I think are probably above the age of 72. Now, I am not going to show that list to anybody because if I'm wrong, I don't want to offend anybody. But I think I'm probably pretty good at this point, and what little I may be off probably isn't as big of a deal. Of those people, and if you're like me, you might need glasses, there's 53 of those pledges. 53 people give about $257,000 to the church. Quick math, about $5,000 per household. Then I took this other category, and this is a group of people that haven't made it to the 72 mark yet, but are retired. And in that group, there were 29 pledging units that come in at about $127,000. That's about, on average, about $4,000 per household. And the other category is everybody else, as I wasn't going to start trying to guess people's ages below that. So these are people that are still working, actively working in the world. And there were actually, interestingly enough, 53 of those pledging units. Just like there's 53 of the above 72, there's 53 of those units, and they total in pledges $157,420, or if you do the quick math, about $3,000 per household. You can make of that what you want to, but I think it's good information to have. Will this continue to trend in the same way? When people get retired, will they give more than they're giving before they're retired? Once they've been retired for a while, will they up their giving even more? I don't know. I do know that in that category of 72 plus, and those of you who might be in that category, you can just plug your ears for a second. We don't know how much longer we're going to have their pledges. That's a reality. And in that category, we have people, a couple of people that give very significantly. That if one of them passes, it will make an impact on our budget. Now, the good news is the ones who give the most do that prepaid pledging, so we already have their money for the year. So we at least have until the end of the year to make a change. But not all of them. And that's real. So, are we in good financial place? As I said to the finance team, you know what? I think we're going to end up in the black, and we've got $543,000 in cash reserves. I don't know what church would love to be in the same position. But I'm also saying that when it comes to that $193,000 of unpledged, that we don't know where the source is, not that we bring in new members just so that they give, because I hope you know me well enough to know that that would never be my position. But the reality is, there will be a gap in how we want to do ministry versus how we will be able to do ministry if we don't find ways of being relevant to the broader community. I think we do a really good job. I know, just based on the last 2 weeks and the comments of people that never attend our church have to say about who we are as a church, what we stand for, that we're making a difference. We just have to get that word out. I got a phone call from a family friend that I was trying to think if I'd ever received a phone call from this person before in my life. From her mother, I have. I've talked to her many times. But from her daughter, I had never received a phone call. She called me on Saturday to let me know that they had tuned in on live stream. She lives in Illinois. She tuned in on live stream for our worship service with the Minnesota Teen and Adult Challenge, because she also volunteers with the Teen and Adult Challenge in her state. She was so moved by that worship service that she reached out to a friend of hers who was absolutely sure that there wasn't a church that he would be welcome in this world, had publicly said things time and again on social media. And she just sent him a note and said, I need you to watch this worship service for me. And he came back and said, wow, I had no idea. Now, her friend was somebody that grew up in the same town that I grew up in, so there was a connection, but it was this church. It wasn't me. But it's what we stand for and who we are. And here's somebody who in Illinois that's reaching out to somebody else who thinks that maybe we have something to offer to them. And I need to challenge you to do the same thing. Because it's easy to do that. I will also tell you, as a way of sort of giving you a little jab, that we don't always do the best job of reaching out to new people, even when they walk through our doors. And I sat down with a couple who had been worshiping us with us for the last year. And I won't give the details so I out them and all, but they're going to go back to their home church. Now, it's quite a ways from here, and they're actually moving and all that kind of stuff, so it's not, we didn't do such a poor job that they're moving away from the cities. But they also realize, there's nothing like having 40 years in a church. And they miss that. And we kind of act like that sometimes, because a lot of us have been here a long time, and we want to be careful not to overwhelm anybody, but in doing so, we also get really comfortable with the people that we're comfortable with, and we need to reach out. Okay, so that's the sermon part of the financial report. Is this helpful? Dennis, did I do what I said I would do at the finance committee? Did it make, Dennis is on the finance committee, that's why I'm turning it to him. Does it make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Some of this, we're all kind of a little bit in a fog. We're not really sure what the future's going to do. And it's an educated, hopefully prayer-based solution. But in the end, it's not our decision, it's God's decision.
What does it look like to be faithful in these unknown times? And I do know that we have a God who already knows what our tomorrow is going to look like. And I hope God thinks more highly of us than sometimes I think of myself. Because I know we're doing the right thing. And we're going to find our way, and it may not be the way we thought it was going to be, but God's going to help us to find that path. Questions? Thoughts? I'm not going to have all the answers. Go ahead. Yeah. Right. Okay. No. So I,
So I just thought it was really interesting because you look at that and you go, oh my gosh, I should probably step it up a little. Or you looked at it and said, I just thought it was very.
thanks. I knew as soon as I took this off, you'd stop talking. So I'm going to try to summarize it for people who. No. So people, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole idea was we need to have a better feel for whether we're in the ballpark, because we don't know what it means to give. And, you know, we can turn to the Old Testament tithing sort of expectation. We can turn to the Jesus expectation of giving sacrificially. I also recognize, and by the way, I do know what everybody gives. I won't go to a church that doesn't let me have that information. And it's not because I want to treat people differently. I don't think anybody's seen me treat people differently. But it's helpful for me to know so that I can understand where they are at with their giving to the church. Because I also recognize I don't know what else you give to. So I never stand in judgment. You know, you may be, American Cancer Society's, platinum list. You may be giving to the arts. All of these things are part of our bigger picture. But I'm telling you where we're at today with this. And so I will take that to heart that was good too. But isn't that interesting how, and again, I didn't start out with this goal in mind. In fact, I didn't think we'd have 53 pledging units that were still working. So that was a nice, pleasant surprise. But the fact that it steps down from 5,000 to 4,000 to 3,000 was one of those where I was like, wow, interesting. Yeah. How many members do we have? Yeah. Great question. We are probably just under 500 at this point.
So if you took the budget and averaged it with the number of members, what would the average amount be if everyone gave the same thing?
Great question, because then it's a matter of, yeah, it is a good comparison. So we had $733,000 given to the church this last year, and if we have about 500 members, which doesn't equate to households, but if we just go with the membership number, so we're talking, what, $1,400? Which, again, you've got the people that give way more than that, and you got people that give way less than that. Yeah, I'm always a little bit reluctant to say not that I think the people that give way more are going to go, oh, I'm going to cut back my giving so that I'm, on average. That's not usually people's motivation.
So how many households are there?
Great question.
Kids are also members once they're returned, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so
as I'm turning to Julie with her whole, 4 months into the job. I'm trying to think of how many mailings go out when we, about right around 300, right around 300 mailings. Yep. Good question. Yeah. New guy.
Can I just say, people,
Okay, so he has come to the annual church meeting, which already gives him way more esteem than, so he's already said you can come and say hi to him. He wants you to know who he is. And by the way, this is Marine's also first annual meeting too. Take time. And well, Gina, but you've been around a long time. Okay.
can we be sure to be giving the microphone to the people commenting because we can't hear in the back?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm new here. Somebody said this was karaoke night. Live. Sorry, I won't take up too much of your time. I have a couple questions. I feel like one of them is relevant, and the other one maybe
Go
the
for it.
fringe. So when you had up on the presentation there, you were talking about the 3 categories where people fall into, and we talked about real briefly the youngers, the up-and-comings, the next generation. Is there a plan for that? Is there a church looking ahead going, what are we going to do? How are we going to get the younger generation involved more with the church? And I understand the missions is a huge part of that. But are there other thought explorations as to how we could do that as a church? Okay.
I think the fair answer to that is we do not have a strategic plan.
Okay.
Have we tried certain things? Allison's good. What? Okay. We don't have a strategic plan. We've tried many things. And then the question is, what is the right thing? And again, it's probably not a thing because it's far from a monolithic group of people. So I'll stop there.
Just stuff that I have heard in terms of general movements of how people do things these days. Younger people, millennials and under, tend to be less likely to give a pledged amount consistently every month and are more likely to be moved by something spontaneous and inspirational, like the way GoFundMes are so, they're scrolling through Facebook and somebody says, my friend is in this unfortunate situation, and they give $20. So, as much as we're not used to we think going to the congregation for a specific thing feels like we didn't meet our budget. It is potentially useful to think of it more along those lines, because if you get an email saying, we're doing this thing for Habitat, people will give. You're doing this thing for this, people give. But when you say turn in a pledge card for what you're going to give every week the rest of the year, it's just not necessarily how people think anymore, which is just a huge shift. If that's true, if what I've read is true, then it's a very different way of looking at budgets.
We have a couple of youth here. We could ask them if you're.
I guess that's what I was.
I'm a millennial too.
I mean, we have 2. I mean, and not to point you guys out, but you're here, right? So I guess that's the generation I'm talking about, and maybe a little older, but how are we going to keep them involved and build and keep that foundation?
Yeah. And I can tell you, we also have seen, and it's not just at this church, but the trending post-pandemic, it's a rebuilding process. And again, I'm encouraged by the things that we're doing and the people that we've got working on it, but it is literally rebuilding what Sunday school looks like, what youth group looks like, what those pieces, how they play into it. And the results are, long-term results. So.
I have another question. This is probably outside the box. It has nothing to do with money.
Okay, great.
I'm Paul, by the way. I'm the new guy. And it's not karaoke night. Here we go. So, as my family started attending regular service here, we were doing much research on the church, Methodist Church. I come from a Catholic background. then went to Christian, and then, so I'm here. So we were doing some studying on the Methodist, and there seems to be some turmoil, more to the south and to the east a little bit. What is the, I guess for lack of better terms, direction that this church, as a Methodist church, stands in? Which direction they plan on taking that, the break away, or is the church going to stay connected, or is there a plan for that? Because it seems to be
A big deal.
right, and that's where I'm going to leave it. And
Nope, that's
I'm the new
perfect.
guy, so just go ahead
And I can speak to that. We as a church took a stance and a position back in 2019 in which we boldly stepped forward where the United Methodist Church as a whole in the Book of Discipline was not willing to go. And that was to say we are a place where all people are accepted and welcomed. And I often say that, ask the question, if it comes to weddings, baptisms, and funerals, the answer is always yes. Now, that wasn't ever intended to be a political statement. Some people look at it now as a political statement. It's still a question of openness and letting God work God's work in how we're to love one another. I don't see, and we are part of an annual conference that is kind of in that same vein. There are some churches within our conference that have left and departed. It hasn't come up in conversation. I don't think there's any reason to believe that we would or should or would want to kind of go the independent route. There's a lot about what it means to be United Methodist in even this meeting. I kept thinking as we announced it and we talked about, reports and things like that, this really is about being community and accountable to one another about who we are and what we do. It's not just a song and dance for the staff to be able to share it with the congregation. Sometimes it works out that way because we're paid the big bucks to come up with these answers. But we are the church together. And I will repeat what I learned in my last appointment, which was at Hanover Zion United Methodist Church, that had about 20 saints that came every Sunday, and they wanted to make it to their 150th anniversary. And I was working full-time outside the church, not in the ministry, and they didn't have a pastor. And God inspired me one Sunday to say, listen, I can come and be your pastor, but I can't be your church too. You've got to be the church. I'll be your pastor. And little did I know and I do this often, I preach to myself, and hopefully you guys get something from it. We learned and grew in what that looked like. And they accomplished it. Now, Hanover Zion had 2 more appointments after that, and then they closed their doors. We need to figure out how to be the church that God intends us to be. Allison?
Well, as will surprise no one, he says the very inspirational thing, and then I'm like, but nitty-gritty details. If you're looking online at movements of churches leaving or not leaving, there's this phenomenon that's happening because the greater denomination took a conservative stance. There are some parts of the country where the liberal churches are leaving because they're frustrated with the conservative stance of the denomination. Places like Minnesota, where the conference took a more progressive stance, it's the more conservative churches that are leaving. So if you see numbers from different annual conferences of, we had 3 churches leave, we had 65 churches leave, we had half our churches leaving, they're not all going one direction or the other, just because of how annual conferences as a whole fall. Individual congregations, maybe inside or outside the conferences, circle,
Yep.
Venn diagram, whatever.
and how we identify ourselves and what does it look like to be a denomination, and our denomination is just a thing of the past. Again, I think the pendulum swings, and as we watch independence, maybe focusing on doing church different ways, that will become less popular. And I think we are very well positioned in who we are and how we do things, and from an accountability standpoint, that really, for lots of really good reasons, we should be a place where people want to go. They just don't know how to find their way here. They don't know what we stand for. They don't know why we do the things we do. And, unfortunately, in lots of cases, people are tired of being associated with something that they feel does harm to a lot of folks. And we just need to be different. We need to show them what we believe Christ intended. John?
Isn't this more of a universal issue with churches in general? Because if you look at it, if you read surveys that are out there for, if people asking young people, what is your denomination, there's more nuns.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about Catholic nuns, the Penguins, whatever. But there's more nuns selected than any other denomination.
Yeah.
And I think it's a universal problem. We need to get more people, more young people especially, involved in the church.
Yeah.
So jazzing up the
I-
Sunday school stuff, trying to, but
Yeah.
I can only do so much. But
Yep, I think that's a good point. And again, it's what does that look like? Is it jazzing things up that's going to do it, or is it making it relevant and real and enjoyable at the same time? Yeah, good. Those were very appropriate questions. Thank you for asking them. Any other questions people want to ask? As people are with pleading eyes looking at me like, I think we're ready to be finished. So we have a few more things that require the action of our group. And I ask you to turn to affirm the budget that we have proposed before us. This is something that isn't required because we do recognize that we've elected or chosen people to help make these decisions on our behalf, and they have passed the budget. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to pay our employees. And somewhere in here, kind of towards the back, it looks like this. We have a budget that I ask you to affirm. Note for next year, we may want to think about page numbers. This has the 2023 budget. And again, it's optimistic, but it's also realistic. We've also always been a church that doesn't play the budget game, in that we have to spend it or else we won't get it next year. We don't do that. If we don't spend it, we don't spend it because we don't need it. And we do spend it if we do think it's the right thing to do and move it forward. That's why we have a plan. But that's also something that I want us to continue to encourage, because yes, we could have cranked down this budget and made it smaller. But then if there's something that we need to do and we don't have the budget for it, it's a rough cycle. So I'm just going to ask for a question. I don't need a motion. I'm just going to ask for an affirmation. This budget is before us. Would this all-church conference vote to affirm the budget as printed in our book? If so, respond with amen. Hallelujah. If anybody else has a problem with it, talk to Dennis afterwards. That's why he's here. The next thing we need to do is election of church leadership. Now, this is an important thing. And this comes a little bit earlier. I'm sorry, it's right after that budget thing. It's entitled Committee on Nominations and Leadership Development Report for 2023. I acknowledge and recognize the work that this group does, and it's a very small group. Allison helps lead this or helps pass around assignments so that we can extend invitations. This report is before you. We need to, and it doesn't need a motion because it comes out of a committee, so it's appropriate to, and it doesn't need a second either. Comes out of committee. So I'd like you to take a look at this report and know that there's still plenty of blanks in this report. And whether you're a member or not a member, in most cases it doesn't matter. We can also make you a member really quick if you want to be a part of something that requires membership. We haven't lifted up membership as a necessity at this church, but there are some committees that you have to be a member. If you know somebody or would like to be somebody that would like to serve in a capacity, talk to Pastor Allison and she will find the right place for you. She does an excellent job of that. I also want to just lift up from an informational standpoint, and this might make some of you really nervous. We're not going to vote on it tonight, but I want us to plant the seed that one of the things that the church, the Methodist Church, in many places is moving away from is this cacophony of committees. And they're moving to what's called a one church board, which basically means a church council that has lots of authority. Right now, our church council has very little authority. Basically, they receive reports and make motions and kind of bridge the gap between all church meetings. The one church model would basically eliminate all the individual committees, and they would be one. Now, there would still be some work groups and some things where small groups might get together for a particular task or a particular purpose, but they're more functional rather than administrative. Am I defining it well, Allison?
I think the big thing is that the single board leadership model unifies the administrative functions,
Yes.
but not all the mission and ministry functions. So it would not try to unify, welcoming committee, missions committee, adult education sort of things. It would be the main administrative, staff, parish, trustees, finance, council. And we would decide how we wanted to put that authority and where the legal authority would lie, in terms of, as a functioning nonprofit, right now, chair of trustees has that kind of, so it's really a parallel with how other nonprofit boards do things, if you think of it that way. So we would still have separate missional task forces, but the administration would be unified if this is what we decided to do. So that we avoided a lot of that back and forth of finance says something, trustees need something, staff parish has a goal, and they're all separate things. It would try to bring that all together.
So we're just lifting it up today as just to let you know that is a model that's working in a lot of different places. And I'm going to trust that our church council chairperson didn't walk out because she's totally opposed to that. And that's not the case. I saw the light come on when she went into the bathroom. So it's something to think about. And again, do we want to spend time in committees? Do we want to spend time doing the ministry? How do we align ourselves to be more effective? And that's just one of those models that's out there that seems to make a lot of sense. So with that said, we put this forward to the group, and I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to move it as a whole rather than elect these things individually, unless there's an objection to that. Seeing no objection, I move the nominations and leadership development report for 2023 for your approval. All those In favor, say aye. Opposed? It passes. The next piece that is part of our approval process, actually I'm going to back up a little bit because I should have put this before you. There are approval of the pastor's salaries that require a charge conference approval, and I'm going to lump in, unless there's questions or people want to speak more to that. I'm looking for where the report's at. Say it. Right in front of the budget. Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much. These include the housing allowance, parsonage allowance, and pastoral compensation that, again, has been reviewed by staff parish relations, has been part of the budgeting process with finance as well as the church council. All of these are included in the budget. They look like this. Any questions? Again, I'm not meaning to drop this on you. If you have problems with it, you can always come back and talk to Sherry Mello, and she'll make sure we have another church council meeting or church conference to approve it. Any objection to approving these as a whole? All those in favor of approving the pastoral compensation, parsonage allowance, and housing allowance resolutions, say aye. Opposed? It is done. There's two more things that are in the back of the book, and these are things that are real and do need to take our time to look at, and that is, we have a process in the Methodist Church where we have a 1-year list and a 2-year list. Basically, if they're on the 1-year list, they haven't participated or given to the church in the last year. This has gotten a lot more difficult with the pandemic because we don't necessarily know who's online, who's not online, and we don't have pew pads that we pass around to find out who's here. So I do want to commend these lists to you. The 1-year list is mostly informational. It makes us aware that these are people that haven't been involved or active in the last year. If there is somebody on that list that you don't feel should be on that list, contact Julie, and she will make those changes so that we don't perpetuate them. The 2-year list, yeah. Yes, we send out letters to let them know that they're on the list. The 2-year list is a little bit more impactful in that if we, let's just talk about the 1st-year list and pass that first. Any discussion about the 1st-year list or anybody that's on that, and again, it can be adjusted and changed moving forward. You can let Julie know later, but we're going to otherwise approve it as is right now. And we can change it. It can be changed. 1-year list is no big deal. All those in favor of approving the 1-year list as printed in our program, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the 2-year list. These are people that for the last 2 years haven't been a part of the church. Haven't been active, and again, we kind of draw the lines broadly because we think that's appropriate. If they're involved in things, if they don't have to go to worship, but if they're involved in something else, if they give, they're no longer on this list. These people haven't, that we're aware of in the last 2 years. When we approve this, these people will be removed from the roles of the church. I will also tell you that It's really easy to get back on the rolls. So if we accidentally remove somebody and they say, wait a second, I still want to be a member of the church, I literally turn to Julie and say, Julie, by the powers invested in me in the United Methodist Church, I acknowledge that they are still a member of the church. Put them back on the rolls. Is there anybody on the 2-year list that causes you to pause or have concern? Yes. Jazzy was here. Jaslyn Woodall. Let's strike her from that 2-year list. She was here it's been here a couple Wednesday nights now. Don't want to discourage that. Anybody else? Seeing no other amendments to this list, all those in favor of adopting the 2-year list as presented to you, say aye. Opposed? And it passes. So I'm going to do the thing where I basically say, here is the report as amended, as we've talked about. If there's anything else in this report that I somehow have failed to ask for your approval, I put this whole report before you. Any objections to voting on the report as a whole? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the report that has been lovingly prepared by Miss Julie Howe, say aye. Those opposed? It passes. That concludes the work of this council, all church annual meeting. Do I have a motion for adjournment? So moved by many hands. All those in favor, upon a prayer, we will close the meeting. I'll say aye. Let's pray. Gracious God, be with us as we do the work of your church. Be with us and inspire us in ways to reach out to the people that you call us to reach out to, and to be relevant and real, genuine and authentic in our faith. Help us to be as courageous and strong in our testimonies as Sherry was tonight in her devotions, being able to link our daily activities to the work that you would have us do, and to witness that to other people. Lord, empower us, guide us, inspire us, and give us rest when we need it. We lift all of this up to you, oh God, in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks everybody for coming tonight, and thanks for all those who were online that joined us. The meeting is adjourned.